We've been going through these Psalms for a while now. It feels like we've been going through it for a while, and we're just now on 37. So we'll just keep going along and see where we get to. Psalm 37 tonight. It's a rather long psalm. We're not going to read everything right here at the start. We'll take it piece by piece. But I think one of the problems that we have, I know I do, as a believer, is short-sightedness. I don't mean that, not being able to see up close, even though that I do have that problem too. But I mean short-sightedness in the fact that oftentimes we only see things in the present, right? We don't necessarily think about the past or the future. We only see what's in front of us. For example, if you've had a bad day this week, how'd that feel? What do you typically do when you have a bad day? You dwell on that, right? You dwell on that bad day. It's as if you've never had a good day, right? You've only had bad days. You can only think about that. More specifically, as it relates to the psalm that we're in tonight, oftentimes when we look at the world around us, when we look at our own situation, our own lives, we see something that the Psalm's very clear about all throughout. We see the wicked prosper. We see what we would think is evil prospering, growing, being put forth in the world, right, to the detriment of the righteous. So we think of ourselves as those that are God's people. We're not necessarily prospering, or whatever it may be, but we see the success of the wicked in the present, and what we begin to do oftentimes is we question. When we question God, we fail to understand that He is sovereign and in control, and we really fail to understand the future that He has for us as His children. But not just our future, we fail to understand the future of the wicked as well. And this is really more common than we might think it is in our own lives. This happens personally with us. Maybe you have individuals in your life where you think, why is that guy, why does he keep advancing? Why does it seem like everything's going his way? He's a bad dude. We think about these things a lot. We see it on the universal scale. We see evil in general. We see evil on the particular stage. And we tend to think that they've won, right? That evil wins, that the wicked have the final say, and that we've really been foolish in all of this. And sometimes that leads to despair, right? Sometimes it leads to apathy on our part. Sometimes it leads to just giving up. And sometimes it leads to actually joining in. So thinking, well, I've apparently got something wrong, so I'm just going to join in with the wicked. And all of this stems, this short-sightedness that we tend to have, from a lack of trust. And so what David is going to show us tonight is that though the wicked may prosper in this life, their ultimate end is destruction. But on the flip side, though the righteous may suffer in this life, though they might not prosper on the surface, God will act on their part, and ultimately they will be the ones that will inherit the earth. And this really reveals to us a common theme that David has when we think about the Psalms, like the Psalm we saw last week, or a couple weeks ago maybe, Psalm 36. And then, especially in Psalm 1, David here again separates the world into two. It separates the world into the wicked and the righteous. We want to call it, in our terminology, the saved and the unsaved, the Christian, the non-Christian, believer, non-believer. The list can go on. And this really is the framework for David here in Psalm 37. In the first 11 verses, he's going to show us the prosperity of the wicked. In verses 12 through 20, he's going to show us the plans of the wicked. 21 through 31, he's going to show us the practices of the wicked, and then 32 through 40, ultimately the future of the wicked. And in each, what David is going to do is he's going to encourage us, the righteous, he's going to encourage us and exhort us about how we are to live in light of what we see happening with the wicked. So the call then is not to be envious, the call is not to retaliate, the call is not to sulk, it's not to give in. Rather, the call is to trust and to delight in the Lord who will act on behalf of his people. So, if you want to look with me here at the first 11 verses, it reads like this: Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way into the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yes, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. So David implies just right off the bat that oftentimes in this life, the wicked, the unrighteous, whatever you want to call it, prosper. He writes, don't be envious of the wrongdoers. And envy is really just this feeling of discontentment over what someone else has, whether it be possessions or money, status, fame, whatever it may be, their life. Therefore, apparently, it seems that David is implying that the wicked are prospering. They have something that oftentimes we want. It doesn't necessarily even have to be the wicked. We do this all the time with people that wouldn't be considered wicked. We do it with athletes, right? Man, I wish I had that guy's life, that guy's celebrities. We do it with people in our own lives that we think maybe have it better than us. Envy can come in many ways, but David here is focused on the prosperity of the wicked in general. And as we see, like I stated above, it's easy for us to become short-sighted in this. It's tempting for us to just give up or to give in. When we see those around us that are prospering, the wicked that are prospering, David says here, look to the future. He says, don't focus on being short-sighted. Don't look at just what you see now. As is the case in the other Psalms that pits the righteous against the wicked, David makes clear, as he states in these verses, that the wicked will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Moreover, he says, the evildoers shall be cut off. And he says, in just a little while, the wicked will be no more. So our call then is not to be envious, discontent, or to have discontent and wish we were in this person's place. And the call also is not to fret, not to worry about why they prosper, why we don't prosper. Furthermore, the call is not to be wrathful towards the wicked, to take matters into our own hands. All of these things seem right in the eyes of the world, but for David, the call is not to focus on ourselves. The call is not to take matters into our own hands. Instead, the call here, in the midst of seeing the wicked prosper, the call for David is to trust in the Lord and his action, not ours, but his. This doesn't mean, I don't want to give off the idea that this means that we are stagnant, that we just say we trust in the Lord, he'll do whatever he wants to do, I'm just going to sit back and just let it play out. The call is not to be stagnant. He writes, trust in the Lord and do good. Oftentimes we have, this idea, you hear it all the time, of let go and let God. That sentiment is not necessarily a bad one unless we use it as this way of getting out of doing anything, of acting, of being proactive and constructive in this life. We are to trust as we go, as we live, as we do good, as we trust, or as we seek to live faithful and holy lives. He writes, commit your way to the Lord. And this implies a walk, right? Commit your way. It's a lifestyle. Commit your lifestyle to the Lord. So it's not enough to just say, I trust in God, and then allow yourself to just sit back and let things unfold. We're to trust in the Lord, but we are to go beyond that. I don't mean that in a bad way as the Lord's not enough. I'm just saying He calls us to go forth into this world doing good while we trust. Trust and obedience, they're not opposed to one another. Right? We sing that hymn, trust and what? Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Got it. Got to look back there. But you see, these two are not opposed to one another. We are to trust and obey. He says we are to befriend faithfulness. He says we are to delight ourselves in the Lord. We are to trust in Him. And what this is going to do, trusting and acting, trusting and being faithful in our doing good works, all this is going to develop within us confidence. Not confidence in ourselves, but confidence in the Lord. When we cultivate this lifestyle of trust, of faithfulness, of delighting in the Lord, it says that He will give us the desires of our heart. It says He will act. He will bring forth our righteousness as the light and our justice as the noonday. So we see trust and obey, and what this leads to is the Lord acting on our behalf. And then we get to verse 7, and you might think it sounds kind of contradictory here, because after saying we're to trust and obey, He says, be still and wait. So you might think, well, which one is it? Or we go out and do good, or we sit back and wait? But I think we need to understand the context here when we see what comes after this be still and wait. So we've understood what we're to do positively, what we are to do. We're to trust and obey, trust and go and do good works. This is what he says next, what we're to do negatively. We are not to take matters into our own hands in anger and wrath, but we're to leave it up to God. Therefore, even the waiting, even the being still or being silent is actually action. It's not taking part, not taking matters into your own hands, but allowing God to do the action. So this waiting, this trusting, this being dependent solely upon God, and then allowing that to influence the way in which we live among others, what does that bring to mind? We've been going through the Beatitudes. That's a beatitude. This idea of being dependent upon God and allowing that to influence the way in which you live among others. What does it say? He says, the meek, there in verse 11, let me find it, but the meek shall inherit the earth. Jesus takes this straight out of Psalm 37, right? So this trusting in God and allowing that to define how we live among others, that is the very definition of meekness. And David affirms that those individuals, the meek, as opposed to the wicked, will inherit the earth. And then we see in verses 12 through 20 sort of this progression here in that we're going to see the plans of the wicked. He says, the wicked plots against the just and gnashes upon him with his teeth. The Lord shall laugh at them, for he sees that his day is coming. The wicked have drawn out the sword and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and needy and to slay such as be of upright conversation. Their sword shall enter their own heart, and their bows shall be broken. A little that a righteous man has is better than the riches of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The Lord knows the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed even in the evil time, and in the days of the famine they shall be satisfied. But the wicked shall perish, and the enemies of the Lord shall be as the fat of lambs. They shall consume, into smoke shall they consume away. So here in this next section, David teaches the very same lesson, right, about the future of the wicked and as opposed to the righteous, but he does so by turning from the prosperity of the wicked to the plans of the wicked. And these plans are specifically directed at the righteous, he says here, the just. So we see more clearly here the disparity between the two parties, between the righteous and the wicked. In the first, the righteous are largely ignored by the wicked, but now the wicked are turning there on the righteous, are intentionally plotting against, he says, the just. David writes that the wicked gnash their teeth at them, they draw the sword and bend the bows to bring down, to slay the upright. But what we see is that the Lord ultimately does what to the wicked? He laughs at the wicked. So in the midst of the wicked's plans and plotting, the Lord is actually laughing at the wicked. Why is this? Why can the Lord sit back and laugh at the plans of wicked men and women? It's because God is not short-sighted. God does not see things just that's right there in front of him. God is He's all knowledgeable. He's omniscient, if you want to call it. Omnipresent, omnipotent, all of these omnis. He's all of it. He's not short-sighted. He's seen the future all the way back, all the way forward. He's not short-sighted. He sees the very day that is coming. He knows that the wicked's day is coming. The day that he says their sword will enter into their own heart and their bows will be broken. So though the wicked live in abundance, though the righteous are brought down or even killed here in the context, we read that better is the little that the righteous has. Because ultimately, what we see is that the Lord will break the wicked and uphold the righteous. Now, it's hard to see that oftentimes. Oftentimes we wouldn't say that I see that clearly happening in my own life or in the life of my brothers and sisters around me. But it's true. We can trust that, as David says, the Lord knows the days of the blameless, and their heritage will remain forever. They are not put to shame in evil times. In the days of famine, they have abundance. So, though we may not prosper in this life, though we may not have status or riches or whatever it may be, we can trust that we have all that we need in the Lord. Even now, even here and now. Certainly one day, we're going to talk about the future here in just a moment, we'll see that we have everything that we need, but we can trust even now that everything that we need, we have in the Lord. David says the wicked will ultimately perish, but the righteous will always be upheld. Then we see this sort of transition away from the plotting and the planning of the wicked towards the actual practices of the wicked, the lifestyle of the wicked. And we see that in 21 through 31. David says, the wicked borrows and pays not again, or pays back, but the righteous shows mercy and gives. For such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of him shall be cut off. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. David says this, I have been young, and now am old, yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. He is ever merciful, and lendeth, and his seed is blessed. Depart from evil, and do good, and dwell forevermore. For the Lord loves judgment, or justice, and forsakes not his saints. They are preserved forever, but the seed of the wicked shall be cut off. The righteous shall inherit the land, and dwell therein forever. The mouth of the righteous speaks wisdom, and his tongue talks of justice or judgment. The law of his God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. So we see then that the plotting and the planning of the wicked, it flows over into their actual lifestyle, their actions. The wicked are seen here as greedy, as those that are okay with thievery, of stealing. This is what it says. They take away, they borrow, but they pay not back. So we see that the wicked are greedy. They're desirous of other people's things. The righteous, however, are seen as completely opposite. They're seen here as generous, as merciful, as those that give, right? Now, I don't know about you. When I first read this, I thought, this is kind of an odd characteristic to be pointing out, right? Between the righteous and the wicked, like sort of an odd way to characterize the two and sort of pit one another against each other. But as you really look at it, as you look at the context and all that David says about the future of both, it seems that there's a good and specific reason that he uses these two examples. Think about it. For the wicked, for those that are characterized by unrighteousness, those that are unregenerate, however you want to say it, this life is all that they have, right? Their possessions, their days, their life, everything that they have now is all that they'll ever have. And so this mentality leads to what? What would this mentality lead to? It would lead to grasping on to all that you have, right? Not letting go of what you have, of wanting more and seeking to get more, regardless of who may get hurt in the process, who you may have to take advantage of in the process, or do wrong in the process, whatever it may be. So when this is all that you have, grasping is the only option that you have. But the righteous, on the other hand, understand that this is not the end. What we have in this life, it's good. I mean, we should be thankful for what we have. But this is not all that we have. We're going to inherit the land. We're going to inherit the earth. Everything that he has will be ours. So this is not all that we have. So we don't have to grasp onto what we have. It don't just have to be possessions, status, whatever it may be, reputation. These things that people harm each other and for, we don't have to do that. We know that this life is not the end, so we're content with being generous, or we should be. We should be content with being merciful towards others. We should be content with giving. And that's what we see. We see here the righteous and the wicked, the two ways, the two ends, the two final destinations. For the wicked, all that they have, everything that they are, we see here be cut off, as opposed to the righteous who, though they may not have much in this life, they will ultimately inherit the land or inherit the earth. So the righteous do not have to live then like the wicked. We know that our steps, he says, are established by the Lord. And regardless of what comes in this life, he upholds us. And David knows this not just theoretically. We see here that he knows it through experience. He sort of takes us back and he says, look, I've been young, but now I'm old. And throughout that whole process of being young, of being old, of being at the top, being at the bottom, all these different phases of life, what I've come to understand is that the Lord is always faithful. That's what he said. He says, though when I was young, when I was old, now that I'm looking back over the course of my life, I have never seen, he says, the righteous forsaken. And with this in mind, he tells us then, go out and do good. Go out and live generously and mercifully. Go out and give. Go out and be faithful and put that into practice. He says, do good. He says, let me find it here. For the Lord loves justice and forsaketh not his saints. They are preserved forever. But the seed of the wicked shall be cut off. The righteous shall dwell in the land and dwell there forever. The mouth of the righteous speaks wisdom. His tongue talks of justice. The law of his God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. So we see it's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different mentality, right, between the righteous and the wicked. And he knows something else here, and I think this needs to be pointed out, because when we start talking about the righteous versus the wicked, if we're not careful, we might start sounding arrogant, right, to call ourselves the righteous. But David understands something, and I think we need to understand it too. This righteousness that we have, this faithfulness, the fact that we are on the side of righteousness, is not our own doing. It's not something that we earned. It's not something we just stumbled upon or came about or grew in on our own. I think it's really interesting that he says there in 31, the law of his God is in his heart. We talked a little bit about that in the Beatitudes, right, and in the Sermon on the Mount. The fact that the reason we can live the way that Jesus calls us to there is because he's given us a new heart. We saw it all the way back in the prophets. Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all these, where they looked forward to the day where what? Where Christ would come. He would take away our heart of stone. He would give us a heart of flesh. And he would write the ways of the Lord. He would write the law of God on our hearts. So a changed heart then ultimately leads to a changed life with new attitudes, with new perspectives, with even new horizons, right? And this leads to the final point, the future of both parties, the future of the righteous, the future of the wicked. We see it in 32 through 40. The wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him. The Lord will not leave him in his hand, nor condemn him when he is judged. 34, wait on the Lord and keep his way, and he shall exalt thee to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, thou shalt see it. I have seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. Yet he passed away, and lo, he was not. Yes, I sought him, but he could not be found. Mark the perfect man, and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace. But the transgressors shall be destroyed together. The end of the wicked shall be cut off. But the salvation of the righteous is of the Lord. He is their strength in the time of trouble. And the Lord shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them, because they trust in him. So what we see here in 32 through 40 is what we've really talked at length about already. And I don't want to just belabor the point here. The wicked, though they seek to destroy the righteous, though they seek to put them to death, to cut them off, David says, ultimately, they pass away and they are no more. The righteous, however, are not so. Their future, our future, is actually extremely, extremely bright. Though it may not appear like that, it doesn't always look like that, right? I think we can all account to that, right? It doesn't always look bright, but it is. David goes to great lengths to show us here. He says, the Lord will not abandon the righteous, nor let him be condemned when he is brought to trial. I think that points us there to Romans 8 when we hear that great passage from Paul where he says, there is therefore no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. He's not going to let us be condemned when we're brought to trial. He says, our call, given this reality, given the fact that ultimately the wicked will be cut off, the righteous will inherit the land, the wicked will be brought low, brought down, destroyed, the righteous will be exalted and lifted up and given their proper inheritance. Given this reality, the call in the midst of our current setting, current situation, is ultimately to wait for the Lord and keep his way. Again, we see that reality of trusting and waiting, but at the same time living the way in which he's called us to live. Those two are not opposed to one another. We will still be there when the wicked are cut off. Kidner writes this. He says, the psalm ends with calm objectivity. What he means by this is that what we see here in verses 39 and 40 is objective truth. This is the end of the righteous, objectively speaking. It's true, it's not subjective. And it leads to calmness, it leads to peace. He says, the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their stronghold in the time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in Him. You know, contentment is a really hard thing to learn. It's a hard thing to do, especially when we look at 2020. I don't think none of us are really content right now with the way that the world is going, in which we live. But this psalm teaches us that God's people can trust in the Lord. And they can trust in Him because He will always act on their behalf. They don't have to wonder about whether or not He knows their future. I have to wonder about whether or not they will ultimately have life in the end. What we see here is that we can trust in the Lord because He always acts on behalf of His people. He always acts on behalf of the righteous. So when you have the wicked over here, when you have the righteous over here, the Lord is always going to act on behalf of the righteous. It may not always appear to be the case, but one day what we'll see is ultimately that this is true. We'll see it clearly. We'll no longer have to wonder. We'll no longer have to see dimly that reality. We'll see it clearly when Christ returns. I want to give us a few moments before we close out to just pray, to just contemplate, meditate on the psalm, if you will. I know it's a little bit of a longer one, but just meditate on that reality. Give thanks to God for it. First, that we are on the side of the righteous, that He has acted on our behalf. When we couldn't act, He acted on our behalf. That is cause for praise. That is cause for giving thanks. So contemplate that, the fact that the Lord acts on behalf of His people, and that should ultimately lead to our trust. So I'm going to give you a few moments tonight to just pray by yourself, and then I'll come back and close this.